Hello, everybody. Forrest Fulsham here with another episode from the National Unnatural Resources Bureau.
Today I thought I'd discuss a little bit about the history of the Bureau. None of this is anything more than you would get if you were to perform a standard Freedom of Information Act request. Did you know that Theodore Roosevelt is considered to be the conservationist president? It was during his presidency that the first funds were set aside to create the Bureau. In fact, one of the founders of the National Unnatural Resources Bureau was one of Theodore's friends. He introduced him to bison hunting in the old Wild West. They also went hunting for other things as well. He also took him cave exploring. It's interesting to note that Theodore Roosevelt set aside the Devil's Tower in Wyoming as a national monument in 1906. Only a few years before that, Teddy and my great-grandfather explored a cave network very close to that region. And it's lucky they came back alive. The tale is enshrined in the archives of the National Unnatural Resources Bureau, and it goes something like this. You must forgive me if I leave out certain redacted information. My great-grandfather, a couple of his friends, which included Theodore Roosevelt, were hiking in the mountains around the year 1899. Following an Indian guide, they located a small entrance to a cave and decided to do some exploring. At the time, they figured it would be a relatively safe trip down a short passage, possibly to discover some Indian pictographs at the far end. They made camp. They waited till morning. When they were fresh and ready, they entered the cave. Now you can imagine cave exploring around the turn of the century must necessarily lack most of the safety devices and pretty much all of the technological devices modern cavers and spelunkers would depend upon. It had to be a pretty rough and ready arrangement. Rope, pulleys, block and tackle, and lots of guts. Well, even the gutsiest sometimes get themselves into trouble, and that's exactly what happened to this group. After about 3 hours in, something happened that trapped them behind a bend. Anybody could have bumped into the wall or a wrong loose rock that set off a chain of events. These things happen in caves. Could have even been their body heat or the increased humidity from the moisture in their breath that caused a change somewhere in the cave that initiated its own self-destruct sequence. Fortunately for them, the small cave they had found was a lot longer than they had originally assumed. Having no choice but to continue, they followed the main passageway, down, until they came to a large chamber that contained a pool of water. And most curiously, they began hearing sounds. The sounds, upon locating them, seemed to emanate from one rock wall of the large chamber they were in. Naturally, they went closer and began to look around. They found a crack, peering through. Each man took turns describing the unbelievable scene before them. Gurner Chapman helped with the pack horses.
My God, I seen this thing come out from across the wall, and it ran across the wall, and it looked like something I'd see when I lifted up a board in the middle of the forest or in an old shed somewhere. And it had all these little legs that stick out. I think I call a centipede, something like that. And it ran off after this thing, and it grabbed it, and it just shoved it around, and that thing tried to fight it off, and there was this goo everywhere.
Jacob Philby helped with pack horses.
Yeah, I saw this thing. It looked like Looked like the headlights. The big headlights is what it reminded me of, all fat, like a fat old seed or something with sprouts and legs coming all around it. And it was just running around down the other side like it was looking for something to do. By God, I almost peed myself just looking at that thing when it turned around. I'm glad it was so big because there's no way it could have got through that crack.
Merle Spindeman, guide.
Yeah, I saw that thing. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I just know I need to spend more time in church on Sunday.
Philip Morgan, hunter.
Oh, I couldn't believe how big they were. If their hides were as thick as a tick's skin is, I don't think I have a weapon that would have whooped on any of them. I'm sure sorry I took a shot at it. I didn't mean for all that to happen. It ain't my fault.
Charlie Stickpinger, cook.
Boy, it was something. But you know what I always say? Possum's peckers as good to the hen as the rooster.
Theodore Roosevelt. By God, I don't know where these things came from or how they got under the soil of the good old country we live in. But I swear when I get back to Washington, I'm going to set aside a special bureau to look into these things. Colonel Jason Pendergrast.
What these things were not snakes or any kind of animal like a bear or a lion. They were more akin to giant insects. Their bodies were shiny, segmented, of the arthropods. But the size, the scale, it's mind-boggling.
Jedidiah Fulsham.
Yes, I observed this creature for at least 10 minutes. I estimate its length at around 300 feet. It was at least 7 foot high at the shoulder. At the shoulder, you must understand, imagine a giant centipede. Legs like giant crab claws. I watched it hunt and prowl and make prey out of creatures as large as a locomotive engine. The sheer strength and power of these creatures, if they ever escaped, they would see people as prey. If they ever reached the surface, I doubt anything we have could stand in their way.
Tired and near exhausted, the party decided to stop there and rest for a time, mostly because of the availability of water, and they felt relatively safe even with the noises due to the thickness of the wall. Sometime during the night, one of their group decided to fire a rifle into the chamber on the other side of the rock wall. In the ensuing mayhem that followed, when one of the creatures rammed the wall, causing several large rocks to dislodge and fall upon the party, members Todd Farrell and Michael James were killed. Jedidiah Fulsham.
I was sleeping when I heard the gun go off. The damn fool shot at something on the other side of the wall. It didn't like what he'd done, and it hit the wall. Mike, the guy sleeping next to me, he got crushed flatter than a flapjack by a boulder. Yes, another man. He was closest to the wall, and he wasn't fast enough. Got snatched by one of those things that came through and dragged into the darkness. God, I can still hear his screaming. It didn't last long, though. It was followed by another noise that wasn't quite so pleasant. I can't tell you much about the next hour or so. I don't remember a lot about fumbling around in the dark thinking I'm going to be eaten by some big old bug. But we all linked up and we got a lantern going.
A hard day followed. It is reported that the sounds of creatures, unidentifiable, were never very far behind the group as they fumbled their way through the tunnels. fuel for their lanterns running lower and lower. Finally, one man noticed a dim glimmer of light down a passageway. They followed it and discovered a near vertical shaft leading all the way to the surface, a distance they estimated at over 1,000 feet. Knowing they'd have a grueling climb to get out, they decided to rest there for the evening, or what would pass for it. It was during this night that they were attacked. Jedidiah Fulsham.
Yes, it was in the night. We could tell because we could see the daylight at the top of the shaft above. We were almost out of fuel, but we decided that we'd expend it, knowing that we'd be out in the morning. So it was pretty light. Maybe that's why it made its move. It determined, maybe, that it didn't have no other choice, that it was now or never time. You see, I think it got in with us when that wall fell, way back in that chamber with the pool of water. That damn fool who shot that rifle didn't do anything but brung all hell down on our heads. But anyways, we lost more than 2 men there. I think it was one of the cook's helpers. I can't remember his name. Didn't never talk much. And I couldn't sleep because I twisted my back. Really wasn't looking forward to the climb. When I heard a noise, just a weird little noise, and I looked over, and I saw that boy. I think he was the cook's helper. Only it really wasn't him anymore. He had this weird black eye, and his face had changed. He looked like a lizard, believe it or not. Hands, feet, like a lizard. He made this weird noise, and then somebody knocked over the 2 lanterns, both at the same time.
My man Witch.
And all hell broke loose. Guns are firing. People were screaming. And there was this hellacious yelling going on. Hell, I curled up in a corner and put all my blankets and gear on top of me and played dead. Eventually, it was over.
You know, the swear, I grabbed a lantern and lit it.
We only got 3 of us. And they got that cook's helper way back in the chamber. I don't know how he did that. But that was enough. Our best climber, Dennis Dillard, he crawled up that wall. Behind him, our second best climber went up.
And on it went until the remainder of the party reached the surface. Later, it was said, the openings to the cave were dynamited shut. What was in those caves? Teddy Roosevelt knows. All we know is what we can detail and document here at the National Unnatural Resources Bureau. Now is a time when I ask you to make a comment below if you like this production. Give me a thumbs up if you really liked it. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click the bell. That way you'll be notified when a new production appears.